so this will mark my 100th video for YouTube that I'm posting, and for it I wanted to do something a little more just me and sharing with you guys about my own experience with death. So I'm going to be a little more real, a little more raw. I do have a lot of notes just to make sure I cover, so I am going to be looking down at my papers more so than normal. So bear with me. Thanks, guys. So I'm going to talk a little about the other side of the table, or as I like to call it, and that's when a funeral director has a loss and essentially is sitting on that other side of the table having to make the arrangements and be cared for, essentially, which I am not very good at. November 16th, 2008 was a day of pain, but it was a day of immense strength within my family. My niece was murdered by her father in a murder-suicide with a handgun, which he purchased legally. He waited all the days to get the permits. He had planned her death. He planned his death very rationally, but still with mental illness. With or without the gun, this day would have happened and we would have still been on this path. Every year on that date, I walk through mentally kind of what went on that day, what I was doing, and kind of play through it. And that's how I kind of do the anniversary date. And I think and I wonder if other families do that same thing, if they remember that date and its reality and walk through it again every year and kind of replay it. Because I know there's also members of my family who don't do that. They won't let themselves go there. They won't let themselves do it. They instead just think about the life and think about what the person did when they were here. So very different vantage points on remembering that date. As a funeral director, I've been asked many times how I handle the death of someone that's close to me. And I don't know if I do handle it always to its fullest, the way that you're supposed to, if there's a supposed to, and when it comes to handling deaths. But I don't know that I do, and I think back on her death. Her name was Kelly Renee, and I don't know that I did handle it all that well, and I don't know how other funeral directors do handle, you know, kind of monumental deaths in their careers that way. But I want to share my experience when my niece was killed, because I encountered different things along the thought process and how we as a family handled things. And I want to share those because I feel like people need to know that these are options and need to know how people within the business even and grieve and feel loss and go through things. So it was a late Sunday and my sister feared something was wrong. Years of interactions with her ex-husband kind of led all of us to feel like there was this other shoe that was going to be dropping, and that was the date that it happened. I got in my car, as my family had done. We all got in our cars and were headed towards Ohio. We didn't know what was going on at that point, and it was a few minutes into the drive and I got the call from my mom, and I don't know how long that conversation was. I couldn't even tell you. I'd pulled off the side of the road and I was talking to her, and all I remember her saying was, "Kelly is dead. He killed her. Will you take care of her?" There may have been many more words in between, but that is truly how I remember it, because I went from an aunt to a funeral director in like 2.2 seconds. So I never, as an aunt, really processed the death. I was always the funeral director in the moment and in the whole situation. I don't know, the drive was long to get down there. I stopped and got my brother on the way, and we got there at like 5 a.m. down to Ohio, and we just waited. I needed to talk to and get things moving. I needed to do what I wanted to know that I could be able to do. I wanted to call funeral homes. I wanted to call a medical examiner's office, and I knew I needed to wait till 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. at some businesses to do these things. So it was this like, okay, I need to get working, but I couldn't quite yet, and I didn't know what to do with myself. It was this moment of, I could have just been the aunt, but I didn't know how to just sit and be the aunt. So I was stewing, waiting to get in funeral director mode. We needed to find out kind of what her condition was, when she was going to be released, when we were going to have things. We wanted to plan, and we wanted to plan them as a family. So when the time finally came and places were open, we found a funeral home that my sister had wanted me to call, and got things coordinated, and coordinated me being able to go in to embalm her and talked with that over with them as well. We fielded phone calls from reporters, which I'll talk about a little more in a bit. Over the course of that day that we were waiting before she was going to be released, we went to the funeral home and got things started there. We went to just pick up some different things, supplies we were going to need. We didn't need any food by any means. We already had people from church bringing food over to my sister. It was crazy. And such a blessing. So I'm sure if you've had a loss, you understand the food. I call it the casserole brigade, but there's so much food. And sometimes I think you don't want to eat it all. And sometimes, man, we ate. For the course of 2 weeks, my family consumed more food, and I guess that was our therapy, was eating. And we ate and kept eating. It was crazy. I went and visited the scene. I went to the house that she was killed, and to me that was important. I needed to be there. I needed to see what was going on. So I went, and I got a few things that my sister wanted that she had with her over at his house. And to me it was important. I wanted to see if the pillow was there, because I knew she was killed in bed, and I wanted to try and get as much information, because we didn't really know her condition. We didn't know what kind of gun he used at that point. We didn't know a lot of things. And so when I saw her pillow and saw that it was a small caliber, and I knew that I was going to at least have part of her to work with. And to me that was comforting. I knew I had a little more vision of what was coming. We sat as a family, wrote her obituary, and kind of got some of those things situated, and before we could it was going to be one other day, so we had a whole day before we were going to actually get her released, to get her ready so we could bring her back to Michigan, because that was our end goal, was Michigan. And so we had news reporters stop at the house. The poor newbie news reporter who drew the short end of the straw had to knock on our door and ask if she could do an interview, and I felt so bad for her, but also I felt anger at the people that had sent her there without calling or without inquiring. And I was angry at the people at the other news places that we had told, no, we don't want to give you a picture, we don't want to talk to you right now, but they talked to his family and got a picture of them together and ran it as if he was this wonderful father. And that angered us, that hurt us, that was I know it's news and it's free, and you can put out there what you want, but there's still feelings attached to what you're doing. And so that, I think, is why I always get so defensive of families when I'm caring for them when it comes to the news media, because I felt what it feels like when things are in the paper that you don't want to be there about your loved ones. So the next day we were preparing to head back, and I needed to go embalm, and so I headed to the funeral home. And I remember I had to go down this long flight of stairs. It felt like the longest set of stairs ever. And so I went down them, and I knew I had to walk into this room. And there was the embalmer who was going to embalm with me from Ohio, because that made it all legal for somebody licensed from there to be with me. Was already in the room. And so I walked in and saw her. And it was such relief to see that she wasn't, missing half her head and didn't have this huge bullet wound on her face, or, it was all these things that you imagine. And I imagine every family imagines these things when you don't know, and you haven't seen, and you don't know what's coming. So once I saw her, I could call my sister and say, we're good. I can do this. You're gonna have her back to say goodbye to. We're okay. And so that to me was such a good moment to be able to do that and call my sister. And so I embalmed, and I was thankful she was autopsied, because I didn't have to ever cut into her. I got to just restore and put her back together. And so that was very therapeutic as well, that I got to take her little body and sew her up and put her back together and get her ready for bringing her home to Michigan. And so once we were done with the embalming, got her all ready, and we brought her upstairs into the viewing room, and my sister and my parents came and saw her for the first time. Sorry guys, this may happen a lot. And they saw her for the first time. And that's such a huge moment for families, I think, when you have especially that waiting day. Like, you're told that somebody's dead and you don't ever get to see them for that, you know, sometimes 24, 36, 48 hours. And is it real? Is it not real? How can you wrap your mind around something until you've seen someone? That's hard. And being in those steps now, I know how hard that was for me, let alone a parent, let alone a grandparent. So that moment was definitely, it was like taking a deep breath almost for the first time when I finally saw her. So I don't know what it was like for the rest of my family, but it was a huge step to finally see her and let something connect. But we put her in the back of my car and tucked her in with 100 blankets, it felt like, and we drove her back to Michigan. And I don't know if we were exhausted and slap happy, but my sister and I drove her in my vehicle, and every time my sister and her would come back through a certain area, they'd go through a certain drive-through, and so we went through that drive-through with her in the back. You know, they couldn't see her. It was nighttime. But that last time doing that and that last routine was kind of a just, I don't know, doing things for a last time with someone, driving them by their house for the last time, or driving them by their farm or something. It's just a moment. You're creating a moment with them one last time, and I think that's really special. Well, I had a funeral home back here that we were working with, and we got there late that night and brought her into the funeral home, and we didn't want her in the prep room, so we tucked her in snug on a couch in the chapel, and made sure we laid things under her and just tucked her in snug. And so we left her there and went home, and I was so exhausted. I don't think I was a zombie. I think back and I don't know, I don't remember a lot of the driving. I don't remember how I got from point A to point B. I just remember hitting my pillow that night and thinking, what the hell just happened the last few days? So the next morning I woke up and hot shower and went back over to the funeral home, and we were finishing arrangements, and I had to get her ready, and we had made plans. We kind of knew what we wanted before we got to that moment as a family, because me being a funeral director, we had talked things over in a way that most families probably don't. So our course of action, we were getting a vehicle that was not a hearse. So we got a red Ford Flex to drive her around in, not like a neon red, but like the, dark burgundy red, because she loved Wiggles and she loved the song Toot Toot Chugga Chugga Big Red Car. And so we wanted to make things a little playful. She's a child. So we made it playful for us and for people that were coming, and it's a serious moment, but everything doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be this horribly saddened few days when you're trying to spend your last moments with somebody. So we had moments of levity for sure. We also wanted her at home with us. So we brought her and her casket to my parents' house, just like they did back in the day, and had her at our home, but we didn't have visitation at the home. It was if we had a few friends that came to see her there at the home. Otherwise, if anybody stopped by, we would close the casket so that they wouldn't be uncomfortable, because we understood this wasn't something for everyone, that you would walk in a home and there would be a casket with somebody in it, especially a child in a living room. But that was her favorite place probably in the world, was at Grandma and Grandpa's. So to be able to bring her back there and have her there with us, and for my sister to get to just, sleep in the room with her, and that was important to us as a family and to each other. So for the service, we did visitation service at the church, at my parents' church, and the church she had attended while she was, when she was up here visiting in Michigan, and we kind of set things up different. Her casket was in the middle of the room. It wasn't up against a wall. And we had it so you could write all over the lid and the inside of the lid, and share, something on the casket. And she had all sorts of things in that casket with her. My sister had filled that casket with every piece of love she could. It was very cool. And so we had visitation there, and then she came home with us at night, and then we brought her back to the church the next morning for the service. Our very special pastor friend did the service. I spoke and just shared a story, and I read her favorite book one last time to her, which is a really cool thing at kids' funerals, to read a favorite book. Nothing makes it less sad, but things can make it way more cool and way more special. So doing things like playing their favorite kid song or singing a song together, it sounds like pain in your heart, but nothing's going to make it less painful. So why not do something that's really cool like that? I asked for prayers for his family and for forgiveness for him, because my family couldn't move forward unless we forgave, unless we understood that he was a sick man and that he never got the care he should have got, and he didn't have the family to love him the way they should have loved him, and the people didn't surround him to let him know it was unacceptable what he was doing in life and the choices he was making. And so we forgave, and we asked people to pray and to forgive, and I think that helped a lot. It's hard. That's hard, but you have to move forward. So we left and headed to the cemetery, and my sister and I drove her in the big red car, and we listened to that song on the way. And at the cemetery it was brief, and we asked people to leave because we wanted just some quiet moments. We stayed for the vault to get sealed, and my sister shoveled in a bunch of dirt, and we were just very hands-on. We were a very hands-on family anyway when it comes to things like this, but we were very hands-on, and I think a lot of families don't realize or know that they can do these things, or question if they can do them, or question what they can also take part in, or can they bring their loved one home for a while. So it's at knowing and asking these things, I think, is important. In the weeks that followed, there was, I look back and I know I was in a haze. I know what a fog, now that when I talk to families about fogs, I know what that fog is. It is like walking through soup all the time and not being able to hold on to thoughts as clearly as you want to, or to know, which end's up and which end's down. And I still wanted answers. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know, could this have been prevented? I wanted to know, why hadn't someone done something? And, you have all these questions, God, why this and why that? And there was none to be found. She was gone. And it was kind of the reality of what it was. And it was accepting that and going through some of those initial feelings. But, months down the road, I realized I never had felt them as I probably should have, because I had turned so much off as a funeral director. I had shut off a part of myself so that I could care for her, and I could go through the steps, and I could try and make sure everything was in place and everything was taken care of, because that's what I do. That's my job, that's my life, that's my passion. So I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for her and for my sister and for my parents. And so I had turned off a lot of emotion, I think, to do that. But I think it slowly had caught up, because that initial pain hit months later, years later even. The anger hit a long time later, a couple years later. I still had some serious anger that would pop up that should have been resolved in the beginning. I went to therapy at one point because I didn't know how to process, but the therapist didn't quite know what to do with me either, because it's not a very common, mindset situation to flip a switch off to do something and then have to flip it back on to feel emotion later. Like, how do you do that? I don't know how people do that. I don't know that there is an answer. I think it's a blessing and a burden to care for people we love, especially in extreme situations. I am blessed I got to do that. I am blessed I got those moments with her and got to care for my family in that way. It is such a special thing that I will forever have, but it's also a burden of that emotional side of caring for yourself also. So it's doing both and figuring out that middle ground. I'm thankful to know what families I'm serving are going through, because I didn't before in some of these ways. The exhaustion that you feel, the chaos, the numbness, the reporters, the food, the love, and the people. And experiencing all these different things allows me to connect with families and to voice what is happening with them, and they understand then that, oh my gosh, she gets this. She's not just business taking care of me. She is in this with me because she knows what's in my heart right now, and she knows what I'm doing, and she knows how tired I am. And I can't imagine not having the visitation and having that time for people to love on me, and for me to get to spend that extra time with Kelly. And so if I know how much I love that time, I cannot even imagine what that time must have been like for my sister and my parents, because the support and the love and the people that showed up that we never would have thought would have come, or the distance people drove, the people that drove up from Ohio and other parts of the country, people that flew in we hadn't seen in years. It was such a blessing to us to be filled with love and to be surrounded by that support. It was amazing. So for people, when people don't have visitation and they don't have a gathering or a time or anything, I don't know how they get that. I don't know how they move forward without that, because I see how important that was to me. One huge thing I learned from this that I pass on, and it was something my mom and I sat on a panel together and talked about different perspectives of this, and it was something I learned during that time, that when a grandchild dies, a grandparent grieves twice. They're grieving for the loss of that grandchild, but they're also grieving this pain and this loss that their child is having. So they're going through this double loss almost, and this double pain. And so being able to talk to grandparents when they come in now, when a child's died, and I'm talking to the grandparent and acknowledging that to them, I've gotten more hugs and more people just falling into me to be held, because someone is verbalizing what it is they're feeling, because they don't even realize what they're feeling, but someone's finally verbalizing it. So I think the last thing I just wanted to say was that, remember that when you're at a funeral home and you are hurting and you're meeting with the funeral director, that a lot of times they've had somebody that they've lost in their life too, and they've hurt, and it's not going to be exactly the same. No loss is ever the same, but maybe they've walked in some of the steps that you've made, and that's why they're making a recommendation to you. And have your heart and your mind open when you're talking and listening to the funeral directors, because they are giving some advice just because it's what worked for them as well. So thank you guys for listening. I'm so thankful to share. It's amazing I'm at 100 videos, and we will keep going with them. So I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.